Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:07 now. It's O'Connor and Company, Thursday morning. Thanks for tuning in here on a really busy news cycle. We're going to give you our recap of last night's Democratic National Convention, such as it is. Also, coming up at 7:35, Steve Moore, heritage economist, will join us. And at 8:05, KT McFarland. Then at 8:35, Phil Wegman from Real Care Politics. I'm Larry O'Connor. Mollie Hemingway with us all morning long. Good morning, Mollie.
Good morning. Great to be here with you.
It is great. Although, we have very early mornings, and it's hard to keep up with the late night activities at the conventions and then be able to plug in here. So people will be forgiven if they missed all of Governor Walz's acceptance speech of the vice presidential nomination. There wasn't a lot there, to be honest. It was a lot of, he's very good at sort of, I guess, I don't know. What is it he's doing exactly?
I think that's the nicest thing you could say. It was a relatively short speech.
Yeah.
I am a believer that more politicians should give shorter speeches.
There you go. So that's your compliment for the governor. That was really good. It was short. Well done, you. Here's how he ended it. Oh, that's not how he ended it. This is how he ended it.
That's how we're going to fight. And as the next president of the United States always says, when we fight,
violent rhetoric there. What's with all this fighting going on?
Actually, in all seriousness, I think that there is a problem with that rhetoric, which has been repeated throughout the convention. We're talking about a party that is working to imprison all of its political opponents, to bankrupt them, to violate their civil rights. We recently had an assassination attempt, and they're like, when we fight, we win. Not a single person has talked about the assassination attempt against their archenemy, Donald Trump, or how that left someone dead and other people shot. I mean, it's a really weird rhetoric.
I got to say, and I am literally shocked that they did not have any moment during this convention to honor the death of the fallen firemen who died in a act of political violence. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were just in Milwaukee. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm conflating Milwaukee, but they were just in Pennsylvania for a rally last week. They never made any mention of this man who died at this event. I thought that they would. I really did truly think they would.
Yeah, Corey Comparatore, whose family is dealing with unbearable loss. And you would just think as Americans, or even just for the political gain that would come from it, that they might say something.
Right. Meanwhile, after Mr. Walz's speech last night, there was some analysis on MSNBC that, Mollie, I would love for you to react to because, well, you're a woman, if I may.
I am.
And you are one of those women that are attracted to men.
Masculine men?
Well, I mean, again, I don't want to go there necessarily, but I would think that. So here's Alex Wagner on MSNBC after Tim Walz's speech, waxing poetic, along with Joy Reid, by the way, about how Tim Walz is really sort of the ideal when it comes to masculinity.
Ism trying to own masculinity in the most regressive sort of misogynist way possible. J.D. Vance lecturing everybody on, what a family means, what it means to be a man. Donald Trump obviously has his own version of manhood. To see Tim Walz out there as a man who is just joyfully embracing his role as the potential vice president to the woman, the nation's first female president, is an extraordinary thing. But also to see his son weeping for his father in a deeply tender and emotional way. And then the last thing I'll say, because I think this hasn't been talked about enough, to see Democrats champion men as voices on reproductive choice. Yeah. As you saw yesterday, I believe, from Amanda Zurofsky's husband, tonight from Tim Walz, talking about struggles with infertility. It takes two partners to get pregnant. And for way too long, this conversation has been relegated to women or the carriers of pregnancies. And it is, I think, way overdue.
There's more to this, but your eyes are already popping out of your head on this.
I don't even know where to begin with this. This info op that these Democrat men are the ideal of masculinity is insane. Yeah. So you have this woman saying, oh, J.D. Vance, who's a loving husband and father, that's toxic masculinity.
Right,
that's
a loving
misogyny.
husband whose father who joined the Marine Corps and fought served in Iraq in a combat zone. But he's not real masculine. That's toxic, I suppose.
So they say Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, is the ideal of masculinity. A man who literally destroyed his marriage by impregnating the nanny of his children.
Yes.
That's the ideal? Really? I mean, Bill Clinton was speaking last night, and we know how good he is with women. But
and then she also mentioned, did you notice she mentioned the husband? She knew the woman's name, whatever her name is, her husband. This guy is the epitome of masculinity. He's the ideal man, but I can't actually name him. I'll just refer to him as the husband of this woman that I know, which I also find, as a man, to be somewhat demeaning.
And then this, Tim Walz, I will admit that I think I have maybe an irrational dislike of this man. Every time he speaks, it just kind of sets me on edge. But this is also not the ideal of masculinity. I mean, first off, the number one thing about masculinity is that it's protective of women. This is a guy who let Minneapolis burn to the ground rather than protect the people in that city. That's not good masculinity. That's really bad. But also she says that, he talks about reproductive issues. What she means by that is she talks about ending reproduction or terminating the life of your child in the womb. But this is a guy who does not know the circumstances of his own children's conception.
Right.
He has said that his children were conceived through in vitro fertilization, and that's a lie. It's either a lie or he does not know how his children came about, which was actually intrauterine insemination, which is a completely different issue, much less ethically fraught.
But if you're a full participant in this extraordinary attempt to get your wife pregnant because of challenges that you've had, I would think a real man, a real guy exerting fatherly masculinity and husbandly masculinity would be really plugged in on the details of that.
Yeah, my idea of masculinity is that my husband does know the circumstances of our children's conception.
Hey, how were your kids conceived? I don't know. Some guy in a white jacket asked for sperm. I delivered it. That's all I need to know.
But this just seems like complete info op and propaganda from corporate media. Or we have a deficit. Like maybe this woman, what was her name? Alex
Wagner.
Maybe she doesn't understand masculinity. Maybe she has not had the benefit of having any real men around her. And so she thinks this is what masculinity is.
Well, this is the MSNBC political panel, which is devoid of any man, actually. It's all women who do this, from Nicole Wallace to Rachel Maddow to Alex Wagner to Joy Reid. Also, did you like the way she described a pregnant woman? The words here?
Yeah, pregnant. And for way too long, this conversation has been relegated to women or the carriers of pregnancies. And
carriers of pregnancies.
It is so dehumanizing to refer to women as carriers of pregnancy. It's a reductionist too. And this shows the confusion that we're experiencing from this Democrat convention, in that they deny the reality of sexual distinctions between men and women, and then they want to brag about masculinity. Yeah. And their confusion is wrought throughout the whole conversation.
I don't know about you. I see Tim Walz. I see him parading around on the stage and getting very exuberant with the crowd reaction stuff. And the first thing I think of is masculinity. This is what masculinity is really all about. And that's coming from me. I mean, I'm into show tunes,
He's actually he bothers me so much that people who like him bother me. Like, exactly. I know Kamala Harris is just who she is, but there's something deeply weird about this man.
Yeah, he's
interesting because he's the one who started that whole
weird thing
that being a loving husband and father who's a former Marine is weird.
A little bit of deflection there. All right, a little bit more on this, because Joy Reid hasn't even chimed in yet about Tim Walz, the epitome of masculinity, on display last night for the Democrats. We'll get to that and more in a moment. First, though, at 7:50.
But also their anguish. And to have a football coach talk about the anguish of infertility, I think opens up a whole new conversation about the stakes at hand for 2024.
And by the way,
all right, we'll let Joy Reid jump in here in a minute, but he's a football coach. Again, this is the redefinition of masculinity through the eyes of the hosts at MSNBC. As a man, what am I supposed to take from this, right? What do women really want, Molly? Solve this for me.
Actually, this is just another little pet peeve. I think it's great that Tim Walz was a high school teacher and that he was the assistant defensive coordinator for a couple of years on the football team.
Many years ago.
But this, he's got a problem with stolen valor in that he keeps inflating what his actual service record was. But also there's a little bit of stolen valor with overdoing the assistant defensive coordinator aspect. Like, I have helped out my kids with the Latin team, but I don't go around calling myself the Latin coach.
Right. Well, here's Joy Reid jumping in here on the masculinity question.
And I love that you're saying that because this is about modern masculinity.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the Democratic Party, the coach that is saying that it's important for him as the football coach to be the faculty, partner for the LGBTQ
Gay
club,
Straight Alliance.
The Gay Straight Alliance. And he's like,
Yeah, he's the football coach, and he headed up the Gay Straight Alliance in high school. And, well,
and I mean, some people, like people at MSNBC, think that's a mark in his favor. Other people find that a little bit disconcerting in general about his obsession with some of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is not real. I'm speechless.
I know it's hard to put into words what we're seeing here. And the gaslighting, by the way, Rush Limbaugh was always so great at showing how the media clearly got on their talking points and they all decided, okay, this is the thing. So after Tim Walz, it's all about new masculinity. Listen, also on MSNBC last night.
I mean, what's really been fascinating is to watch the men of the Democratic Party model a kind of masculinity that is simply 21st century masculinity.
Speaking of 21st century masculinity, how about that? How about that lead in? We got Senator Cory Booker.
Cory Booker.
Oh, who does not view Cory Booker as the epitome of masculinity? But doesn't this show you how Democrats view modern masculinity? They like it so long as it's subservient. Mm-hmm. So as long as it's in service of their agenda, as long as this man, Tim Walz, understands his place.
Yeah.
I don't know how attractive that is to either men or women, most men or women. I think most men and women like men to have a strong posture, a strength, not this weakness that seems to be what Democrats want masculinity to be.
Also, by the way, Dana Bash over on CNN also chimed in after the speech about this whole idea of Tim Walz exuding masculinity. So again, they all got on the same page. They all got the same talking points. This is the takeaway: masculinity.
I really think they need to have a diversity of thought in these news shows just to understand. I mean, a lot of the women who I am speaking with share my feelings that there is something not repulsive, but really off-putting about Tim Walz. Yeah. I mean, I'm really glad for these women at MSNBC that they're turned on by him, but I don't think that's the case for most women.
Well, I think for most women, any guy who turns on Rachel Maddow is going to be at the top of the list for them. All right, and one of the ways that they're trying to exude this masculinity thing, of course, with Tim Walz is to emphasize his military career. This was the video that played before Walz took the stage.
I had 24 kids.
Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Here is the video.
National Guard, rising to Command Sergeant Major.
Did you hear that language? Rising to Command Sergeant Major. And there's a picture of him with the Command Sergeant Major rank on his sleeve. But, of course, that's a certain artfulness to the language there, isn't there?
Right, because he did not fulfill the duties of the rank to which he rose. So he was pulled back down after
to Master Sergeant
because he did not actually complete his service.
And he didn't complete his service because it would have had to be completed in a war zone. And he chose not to go to that war zone. He instead chose to go to Congress. By the way, this is also a tacit admission that he's been lying because he referred to himself constantly as a retired Command Sergeant Major. They chose not to use the term retired Command Sergeant Major. They said rose to Command Sergeant.
But stolen valor isn't just about falsely making claims, but also leading people to believe something that's not true. And the entire embrace of this falsehood, this lie that Tim Walz retired as a Command Sergeant Major when he in fact abandoned his troops, and you've got dozens of men out there talking about how abandoned they were by him. That is just as much stolen valor as making the overt falsehood.
By the way, also last night was Nancy Pelosi. She's the one who engineered this whole coup. None of this would be happening without Nancy, and the crowd were so excited. Listen. Oh, they love her. They love her. She went on to talk about how great Joe Biden was as a president and what he was able to accomplish.
On January 20th, 2021, with the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we established one of the most successful presidencies of modern times.
She went on to talk about the millions of jobs.
Millions of jobs.
Not counting the million that they just misreported. But Molly, I was going to say, if you're Joe Biden watching this, knowing everything that went on, what's your reaction? But I think he was asleep. What about if you're Jill Biden? Because you know how ticked off she is, and she's still cognitively aware of all of this.
One of the crazy things I read in corporate media this week was that the Democrat convention had no drama. How about the drama of ousting the sitting president who built up a campaign, forcing him to turn it over to someone who's never won a single vote at the national level in her life, and having to, have people like Nancy Pelosi there. I do want to say Nancy Pelosi exhibits some masculinity, and I mean that in a good way. She actually, she's cheered on by Democrats because she achieves what they want her to achieve. She should teach the men of the Republican Party a little bit about how to use power when you're in power.
Well said. And but it's true. The Democrats right now, there's really no drama involved here. Also, Act 2, Scene 4 of Julius Caesar, when the assassination happens and there's all these knife stabbing scenes. Not a lot of drama in that either, I don't think. Just a typical day at the park.
Now. On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 on this very busy Thursday morning in the nation's capital. We're giving you a recap of day 3 of the Democratic National Convention and also hitting all the hot topics you care most about. Thanks for letting us ride shotgun with you here on your morning commute. And all you kids in Loudoun County on your way to school, hey, happy first day of school. How cool is this, huh? I'm sorry. Coming up at 8:05, KT McFarland's going to join us. And at 8:35, Phil Wegman, Real Clear Politics. I'm Larry O'Connor. Mollie Hemingway in this morning all day. It's been great, Mollie. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Here was Donald Trump yesterday at a really great rally, and we're going to play you more highlights of it. But he touched on this story we hit on earlier about the Bureau of Labor Statistics admitting now that they misreported jobs numbers over the course of a year by nearly 1 million.
I want to address the massive scandal around the revised job numbers that were just announced this morning, a little while ago, just before I came up. I got to see them. And it really isn't a revision. It's a total lie. Total lie. There's never been any revision like this.
There hasn't. And last night before the DNC commenced, the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, was asked specifically about this, but really, she was asked, is this going to hurt Kamala Harris?
When you hear that, do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No. When I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
She's not familiar with that, Mollie Hemingway. Well, let's bring on Steve Moore. He's an economist with the Heritage Foundation and also an economic advisor to the Trump campaign. Steve, what's more disconcerting here? The fact that the Bureau of Labor Statistics misreported nearly 1 million jobs over the course of a year, or the fact that the Secretary of Commerce is unfamiliar with that fact?
Well, good morning, Mollie. Good morning, Larry. Great to be with you guys. First of all, let me kind of explain what's going on here a little bit. So, every let's see. The jobs report will come out next Friday morning. So the first Friday of every month, these jobs numbers come out. So I always do with Maria Bartiromo. I'm on at 8:30 a.m. on that first Friday, and we go over the jobs numbers as they're released. And so what's happened over the last year is that, we come out with sometimes some of these blockbuster numbers, 325,000 jobs or whatever it might be. And then what the pattern has been over the last 16 months or so is they keep overestimating what the numbers are. And so then you get this big headline number, right? Oh, look at all the jobs we're creating. And then over the course of the next month or two, when they do the revisions, it wasn't 325, it's 250 or two. So there's been a 500,000 downward revisions of the original numbers that have been announced. You follow me? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so they keep putting out these big numbers, and then they keep revising them downward. Now, on top of that, so that was about 500,000 additional jobs.
So those are the incremental revisions over the course of last year, and now they do this giant batch.
Yes. Now, what I wanted to make your listeners understand is this 810,000, something like that, revision. That's on top of the 500,000 that they already overestimated the jobs. So this is a gigantic error. This is not a small error. This is a huge, huge error. I mean, 1.3 million jobs, that's like practically the entire working area of the whole Washington, D.C. metro area. So these are really, really big errors. The question, of course, is whether these numbers were intentionally falsified. I doubt that. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, do you think, Mollie, you follow this stuff, do you think they actually intentionally got this wrong? Do you think they cheated?
I don't know what's worse, if they intentionally got it wrong or if they're so incompetent at gathering the numbers that they got it this wrong. Yeah. And I do think we need to understand why are they so off? And also, what are the consequences of being so off? How has this affected things in the last year as they've been wrong with these?
Yeah, you put it very well, that either they're lying or they're incompetent. And I don't think either one speaks very well of the Biden administration. Now, let me make one other kind of political point. I've just put out this report on that we call the Trump miracle and the Biden bust on the economy. So we looked at about 25 statistics, Larry and Mollie, on everything from small business confidence to real take-home pay for workers to the mortgage rates, to the inflation rate, to the price of gasoline, all the kind of things that people care about when they talk about the economy. On virtually every one of those statistics, Trump has a superior record in his 4 years in office than Biden does. The only one where Biden had a better record was on jobs. Huh. But guess what? They were lying about this. So now it looks like there was not a single statistic where the Biden years have been better than the Trump years. And by the way, I think a lot of your listeners also know that when Biden was boasting about all the jobs he was creating, half of those jobs were just jobs that had existed under Trump that went away during COVID.
Right.
So,
it's not job creation when a Democrat governor like Andrew Cuomo or Gavin Newsom decide to lift restrictions and allow you to go back to your job. That's not a job creation.
Right. Well, you're making a good point, too, is that the other thing that Biden keeps saying is that, he rescued the economy from COVID, when in fact the last 6 months of Trump's presidency, the economy was in a rapid recovery. The economy grew by 11% in the last 6 months of the Trump administration. We were on our way to a big boom. Biden comes in. Here's the other thing. Do you guys know, I bet you do know, what the inflation – remember, Larry, I always ask you after your question.
I know, it's always a quiz with more.
I know,
what do you got? What do you got?
Do you know what? Do you know what? I know Mollie knows the answer to this, Larry. I don't know.
It's hard not to be a little insulted, but you're right. Go ahead.
But the question is, do you know what the inflation rate in the economy was the month that Trump left office?
I want to say it was around 1.3, 1.5.
You're pretty good. Okay, you get an A today. It was about 1.4, 1.5. So you're pretty close.
Thank you.
So think about that data point. And by the way, in the last few months of the Trump presidency, we're running at 1 to 1.5% inflation, which is actually below the target that the Fed, sets in terms of their desired inflation rate. So then Biden comes in, and in 18 months, he takes the inflation rate from 1.5% to 9.1%. And now he's trying to blame the inflation on Trump.
Right. Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up.
You can't. And sadly, we got to leave it there, Steve Moore. But I appreciate you joining us. And
I'm glad you got it today.
No, exactly. And I'm, again, a little insulted at how surprised you were that I got it right. But that's fine. I'm used to it at this point. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
It is 7:40. Bill Clinton spoke last night at the DNC. They keep talking about forward. Honestly, unless you count Tim Walz last night, the only other person that sort of represents the future for the Democrats, I guess AOC, she gave a speech the other night, and Josh Shapiro, who's been cast aside because he's a little too, Jewish. But other than that, this entire DNC has been a look in the rearview mirror, hasn't it?
Well, in part because they've ousted President Biden, so they need to provide some legitimacy, and they're getting it from the old guard. I think it shows how much President Obama and predecessors were involved in the coup.
Listen to this from Bill Clinton, though.
And then he did something that's really hard for a politician to do. He voluntarily gave up political power. And
He then compared him to George Washington. I'm not kidding. He compared him to George Washington.
So in the case of George Washington, you had the entirety of the country begging him to stay on and him saying he's stepping down.
Right.
That is not what happened with President Biden, who was ousted in a coup that we still don't even understand all the particulars.
And John Adams and Thomas Jefferson didn't pull George Washington aside and say, "You got to go, man. You're going to kill us here." Well, actually, Thomas Jefferson sort of did because he ran against. All right, that's fair. Also, Bill Clinton said this.
Take it from a man who once had the honor to be called in this convention the man from hope. We need Kamala Harris, the president of joy, to lead us.
All right, two things. First, that's a racist pronunciation of her name. You're not allowed to do that. Otherwise, you will be called out. But secondly, I mean, just like The Man from Hope was literally scripted by a television sitcom writer back in the 90s, the president of joy, is anyone buying this?
Except The Man from Hope really was from hope and really did create this vision of a better America. He went from Hope, Arkansas to Yale University. And now you have all these people on stage saying that it's awful that J.D. Vance grew up poor, went to Ohio State University, and then made it into Yale Law School. And they're saying that's a horrible thing.
Good point. 7:53.